Hello everyone and welcome back to Adobe Live APAC. We are here once again for part 2 with the lovely Yori Narpati. Now before we get started, hello, I'm so excited for this one. But before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we live, create and learn on today, paying respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, Yori, personally, I'm very excited for this part 2 and I'm so happy that I was able to host you today. But before we get into it, do you want to do a little bit of a recap?
Oh, yeah, of course. So hi, everybody. I'm happy to be back here for part 2. I did part 1 on Tuesday, in which I showed how I did the background illustration for the little animated Halloween house that you might have seen on Tuesday. So today I'm going to be going into how I set up my timeline in Photoshop, as well as roughing up my animation, doing the cleanup lines, and actually doing colors and exporting. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about today.
Fantastic. And we can see this absolutely adorable, wonderful and fantastic illustration now in motion here. I just want to say hi to the chat as well. So hello Rin, hello Frank, hello Flynn, who's the tech man and chat mod for today. So welcome everyone. Of course, as we go along, we're sort of going through in sort of three or four stages today for the stream. So if you have any questions at any of those stages, please feel free to post them in the chat, and Flynn and I will try to answer and ask those to Yori and answer as many of them as we can. But without further ado, shall we say it's time to hop into Photoshop?
I think so. Okay. So let me just. Okay. So this was the background that we did on Tuesday, and I've just exported this out into a JPEG, flattened it out, and then put it into like a different file. Reason being is that I don't want to have all my layers stacked when I'm doing my animation, because it's gonna be a lot of layers and it gets a bit confusing. So what I usually do is that I would export it out and then just have like a flat layer of background. Again, if you have any parts of the background that you want animated, then obviously you leave those out. But all of these that's in the background now is just static. Okay, so I guess like just as a preface, like what I usually do in Photoshop is these kinds of like it's like hand-drawn 2D animation. So it's not something like a rigged puppeted animation that you would find maybe in After Effects or something that you would do in Flash. It's not something like that. So it's more close to doing like traditional 2D animation. So this is kind of what I did as well in uni, and that's where I kind of learned how to do it in Photoshop as well. Just to recap from what I said on Tuesday, as well as on my Adobe Max, is that reason why I use Photoshop to animate is that because it's just more convenient to have like an all-in-one application for everything. So you can do your background and then your animation in one application, and they'll look more consistent because you're using the same brushes. And I much prefer, for myself, I much prefer using the brushes in Photoshop because you can customize them, because you can download so many different really good brushes out there. So that's kind of my reasoning for animating in Photoshop. Also, because in my actual work, I'm mainly a concept artist and illustrator. So I deal with a lot of very like static images. I don't do a lot of like actual like moving camera animation, things like that. I did a little bit of it at uni for my honors film. I kind of did my background and then my animation in Photoshop and then exported them out and then comped them in After Effects. But in the case of like this animation, it's just something simple that I want to post. Maybe it's like a social media post or something like that. If you just want to add a little bit of fun, to illustration, I think this is quite a good way to go about it, because you don't have to download any other applications for it. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Fantastic. And so many, you know, so many great things to talk about, all just in that introduction. I love the idea of I mean, of course you would merge layers or flatten layers to make it easier as you go along. And I didn't realize, well, just now I realized, I guess, that that's the same for animation, just, you know, to keep it as clean as possible, because you're doing something a little bit more complex. So that's great. And certainly this is giving me like older Disney 2D animation vibes, and absolutely love it. So
alrighty, so let's jump into it. So first thing you want to do whenever you're doing animation is that you'll get your timeline out first. So you go to your windows, and then you go down here and then click on timeline, and then once you have that, you have to go down here and create video timeline. So this has now become like a video file. So the way that animation or like frames work in Photoshop is that all the layers that you have in your layers tab is actually your frames. So you have to set it up correctly by going to like this panel on the side, and then you go to panel options, and just you can set it up into like if you want to have thumbnails, you can, but I prefer to not have any thumbnails, so I'll just have that. And then you have to set your timeline frame rate. So I usually go for 24 frames per second, just because that's the standard for 2D animation. And once I have that set up, I want to make sure that I have enabled auto grouping of clips. So what this does is that when I'm setting up my my frames, so what I would do is that I would just create a new layer on my layers tab here, and then I would adjust that so that it's the amount of frames that I want. So I would usually animate on 2s. And then once I have that, you can see it here, 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frames. So I'll have it on 2 frames, and then I'll just duplicate this. And then because I have my enable auto grouping of clips checked on, I can just click and then drag it, and it'll automatically create a video group.
Well, so that's very neat.
So you want to make sure that you have enough frames for your animation. So in this case, this is a very short looping animation. It's probably just about 1 second long. So I'll just have to duplicate as many layers as I need. So this is kind of like the manual way to do it. There are other plugins that's available for Photoshop where you can speed up this process, and you can basically just create frames in a click of a button, and you don't have to resize it and things. I think it's called the Animator's Toolbar or Animdescent. I think there's a couple plugins out there, but I don't really use them. So I'm just showing you how I would do it without all of those like fancy plugins. Yeah, so now that I have enough, let's say this is like enough frames, I'll go in and I'll do my rough. Okay, sorry, just going back to why I duplicated my frames instead of actually clicking new layer each time I want a new frame. Is because if I click on new frame, a new layer, it'll create a really long one like this.
I see. Yeah, I was wondering that.
Yeah, that's the reason why I'm not just like clicking new layer every single time like I want a new frame, because that will happen, and then it will be a hassle because I have to go in and then
you have to shorten it every time.
Manually resize it, and it's just like a lot of time like kind of wasted. Like that. Sure. So yeah.
That's really good. And you know, like with plugins, of course they can be really handy, but if you don't need them, you don't need them. And sometimes, you know, it's great to be able to know, like, how can I perform this task, or how can I use the program without any plugins to kind of also see the benefit of them, if that makes sense. You know, it's kind of like know the rules before you break them. And certainly plugins could help with speeding up workflow, but I also quite really like, you know, like you've prepared your frames, you know, this is how long this is going to be, and it kind of helps you visualize how many, you know, roughs and betweens and everything like that, which I'm sure we'll get into now. But yeah, that's a really neat trick. And I love just not having to, you know, shorten down every single new frame, because that's certainly what I would have done in the past. So I'm writing this tip down for myself too.
Alrighty. Another thing is that I would usually duplicate the group as well, just because if I want to have like, of course, I'm gonna have multiple groups of animation. Like I'll have, maybe I want to animate like a little water droplet, or maybe like some smoke, or maybe the character. So I'll have one handy and just hide it, and then I'll just use this one, and maybe use like a color so that I can see it on the timeline.
Oh,
it's
smart.
Like, okay, yeah. I'll also rename this to rough. Let's just say, I don't know, water or something, so that I can see it.
And that's neat too, because then when you duplicate, and again, this is a mistake. Well, this is something that I now used to do, but when you already have an empty sort of video group ready to duplicate, you don't have to go back in and erase everything from every single layer.
Yeah.
So truly learning so much today already. Goodness me.
That would be a pain. So another thing that's also a feature in Photoshop is onion skins. So onion skinning is basically just, you're able to see the frames before and after the frame that you're currently drawing in. So it's kind of like in traditional 2D animation. What you would do is that you would like flip your paper to see so you can see the movement. So that's kind of the same concept. So you have to click here and enable onion skins. And what I would usually do is that, okay, I would have to lower the opacity for the background as well, so it doesn't distract me as much. And you can also change the onion skin settings. So you can change to how many frames you can see before and after. So let's say I want to put in 2 frames before and 2 frames after. And then I'll show you how that works. So I'm gonna quickly just select I don't know, maybe like a blue color, just so that I can separate my rough from my thin lines later on. And I'm just gonna do something very, very simple, just so I'm just gonna start with that, and then once I'm on,
this is where the fun thinking work begins. So to disclaimer everyone, we're gonna show roughs, we're gonna show cleanup, and we're gonna show each individual part of the process, but the actual act of animating, you need a lot of your brain for that. So to talk and engage with the chat and animate at the same time is a next level feat. So we're going to simplify it a little bit for the stream today, but yeah, just heads up on that, but it's going to be great.
I'm going to try my best to like keep talking as I'm actually showing this. So basically what I'm doing now is that I'm just like roughing out. So as you can see, now that I have my onion skin turned on, you can kind of like scrub through the timeline, and then you can see the previous and the next frames. And that's really helpful in animation, because you want to make sure that your volumes are consistent. Otherwise, it'll just like wobble around a lot. So this is like a really simple, like obviously it's like a really simple droplet animation, but yeah, that's kind of like the purpose of having that on. So I'll just keep going. Again, like with animation as well, I guess there's 2 ways you want to go about it. You can do it straight ahead, kind of like what I'm doing now. So just kind of like next frame and then just draw, and then next frame and draw. Or you can do it with like keyframes. So you draw like the first pose and the last pose, and then you draw kind of like the in-between. But yeah, with this one, I'm just kind of like going in like straight ahead.
Fantastic. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to have another look at chat, because we've got a lot of people that have joined us. Of course, we have the lovely Brenda. Hello. Lovely work on the cutting and the sewing of the t-shirt that Yori is wearing. So props to that. We were talking about your potential button-up t-shirt business in the previous stream. So if you haven't caught the previous stream, please do check that out. And what else? We have Rin, which I mentioned before, but we also have Anna. Hello Anna, and Kendall, lovely to see you. I believe we also had Stephen. Welcome back, Stephen. And also just lovely comments on the piece itself. So the animation is looking fantastic. It's adorable. It's a mix of Disney and Ghibli, which I think is a perfect description. And Lovely to see everyone being as in love with this piece as I am. So that's always great. A great comment from Kendall, which is, this is nice to see. I've been using Time Lord to do these and it's faster, but I never really think about what the plugin is doing for me. So she was saying just before about, know how to do the things before you get a tool to help you do the things. Which, it sounds so simple, but it's great to remember to know, like, why is this tool, for example, helpful, and is it still the best tool to get the job done as well. But Time Lord might be something to check out just out of curiosity. And of course, lovely Flynn, letting everyone know that if you do have questions for Yori and don't want to listen to mine all day, which I understand, please feel free to post them in the chat and we will get to them as we see them. Let's see, and also comments. Yay, animating in Photoshop is fun. I could not agree more. And also from Kendall, that pose to pose is a much more confusing way of animating for your brain, which, yeah, I can see how there's a use for either approach. Frame by frame is definitely perhaps a little bit more methodological. No, that's not methodological. I shouldn't try complicated words on stream. That's not a good idea. But it's sort of very, it might be slower, and you really, when you have the onion skinning, for example, like you can really see the trajectory of what you're animating. So not only the shape, but make sure that the line work sort of matches throughout, so you don't get these like wobbly thick and thin lines, but it also, helps you guide and maybe help you determine, like, oh, this is what the next bit of the animation should be. And of course, a shout out to your Adobe Max talk as well, which I thought was fantastic, and I'm definitely gonna be rewatching it again. But we do have our first question from Flynn. What doesn't he do? So his question is, how do you learn the physics of animating things like water droplets?
So I guess this question is maybe more about like animation basics, which I'm not really talking about in this session because I'm like showing the tools more, but I guess I can talk about it a little bit. So basically with animation, what you have to pay attention to is the timing, as well as the spacing in between the frames. So if you want to make something move a bit slower, then you'll have more frames, and then the spacing is closer together. If you want to make something move faster, then you'll have them spaced out a lot more. So for example, with like this droplet, I want the droplet to kind of ease in. So I have, like, as you can see here, I've got like 3 frames very closely placed together. Like the images, like the actual drawing is like the lines are very close together, and then it kind of speeds up when it drops, and then it hits the little wood piece, and then it kind of speeds up as it falls. So that kind of, I think, mostly looking at references. If you're not sure how things move, what I would do when I was doing my film, or when I was like studying animation, I would film myself a lot and actually just act out my characters and stuff, and just kind of look silly. But then I would like reference those and then use it in my actual animation. So I guess that's how I would kind of, because like obviously like us animators, we're not experts on like every single subject. So we have to pretend that we know what we're drawing, like how things work. As much as you'd like to know everything, which I very much relate to. One can't know everything, but that's a great tip. Learning how to animate from seeing and doing. So seeing with reference, whether that is sort of real life footage, or how other people have animated something before, or acting it out yourself. I think in almost every behind the scenes sort of extra content on a Disney movie or a Pixar movie or any other movie, you do get that sort of almost kind of must-have section of watching all the animators
like trying to be the characters and doing all like walking funny or like passing a ball, just because they need to study how the muscles and the anatomy works, and
definitely.
Maybe, or not maybe, but finding out how to make something, you know, believable looking and fitting with the theme or the sort of the design of the animation as well. So great question. We do have another one, and I'm just seeing also one question on YouTube. So heads up, if you're watching on YouTube, hop on over to behance.net/live, because that is where we are monitoring, goodness me, and answering all the questions here today. So also hello Gareth.
Just as a quick note, just to show what I'm doing here now. Like, so I've kind of done like a rough movement of like what I want the droplet to look like. But yeah, what you can do here is you can have loop playback so that you can watch it over and over again. So that's just kind of like, just have that checked, and then make sure that you can move the slider like to the side, just so it'll play like this small section over and over again.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's to determine, you know, if you want to focus in on a particular section of the animation.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. So I'm just watching this over and over again to decide if I want to add in like, you know, more in between frames or anything like that, or change something that doesn't look right. So that's what I'm doing now. I feel like I might need to like add in a little bit more in betweens for the beginning part. So sorry, go ahead. You were saying.
No, don't let me interrupt you. But this is certainly like the time-consuming part of animating, you know, frame by frame, as opposed to, you know, with a word that I've completely forgotten, with like
maybe like
with the in-betweens. Yeah, with the frames.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Keyframes. That's the word. I'm a little bit out of practice, it seems. But yeah, so there's benefits to frame by frame. There's benefits to keyframe, and I think it really speaks to like what feels good to you in approach sort of how to animate. Like if frame by frame really just makes sense and, you know, it's relaxing and fun, then that's certainly the approach you should take. But it really, like every artistic medium, you know, has the time consuming, the tedious bit to it, whether that is waiting for the paint to dry or checking if you have enough frames, or whether the T-bar or X-axis is right on your typeface. As with anything, there's that little tedious bit, and sort of the way you approach those potentially tedious components of your work, that is really what that is like an opportunity for you to distinguish your process and create something unique and interesting. Cool, rant over. How about we go to a question? That sounds great, Johanna. Okay, so from Rin, here we go. I ran into an issue while trying to do a simple transition between colors for a texture. So do you happen to know if the timeline doesn't like clipping masks?
Oh, so are you asking me if, so is it because you've clipped on a texture onto a layer? Like to a frame? Is that what's happening?
Rin, if you can, just elaborate a little bit more on that question, maybe give us a little bit more context. But in the meantime, we'll ask another one, which is from YouTube, which is great. How do you switch frame by frame by ease? So aside from picking with a mouse digital paint. Oh, okay. So they're basically asking like how do you navigate between the frames? Do you only press sort of play and pause, or can you navigate with, for example, the arrow buttons on your keyboard sort of in between the frames?
You can use your arrows to. That's what I'm actually doing now. Is that I don't.
Oh, fantastic!
You can do that and just kind of look at it like frame by frame. But I usually forget that I can do that, and then I'll just kind of do this. It just kind of feels more natural. I'll just like have my pen and just like kind of drag it on the timeline. But yeah, you can do that as well.
Fantastic. And just looking through the chat, School of Motion is also a fantastic resource for gaining references and to learn how to animate and lots of different things.
Okay, just I guess ask you if we're good with time, because I think we're about like 20
yes,
yeah,
1:25.
Okay,
so almost
I guess
approaching halfway, I believe.
Yep. So I guess I'll just maybe move on and try to do like my cleanup lines, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
But yeah, basically that's how I would do my rough. If I'm doing a more complicated animation, then what I would do is that I would go in and I would lower my opacity, and then go on top and then maybe like do like a cleaner version of a rough and then do the lines. But since this is like quite simple, I think I'll just go ahead and then line this.
Fantastic. And it's interesting, like, just because what you're animating is complex doesn't necessarily mean, you know, more or less frames. And also having kind of sketchy isn't the right word, but more like textured lines could also actually really add to the piece. So it's interesting how you know, choose like, okay, now it's time to clean things up because I want it to look a little bit more refined for this illustration animation, and also kind of deciding like where can it look maybe a little bit I want to say chunky, but that's not the right word, but where can it look like a little bit more I'm not sure if I can articulate this correctly, so I'm gonna look in the chat again. Let's see.
Also, just as a quick note, if you can see what I'm doing now is that I'm closing up my lines. Reason being is that so it'll speed up my coloring process as well. Because I think I've showed this like several times before during my Adobe Live sessions that I like to use the magical selection tool to fill up my base. So that's why for these like couple, you know, earlier frames, I've kind of closed up the shape near like the leaf.
Fantastic. And you know, that is just another way of speeding up the process as well. So like thinking, what are the sort of small steps in each stage that I can do and sort of embed it as part of your process to really speed things up as well. And you know, your way of coloring definitely does that too. I'm going to see if Rin has clarified their question. Let's see. Also, hello, Moat Avoid. Lovely to see you. And Gareth, I believe I said hi just before. Okay, yes, we have a clarification. Fantastic. So, Rin has a clipping mask texture applied to a layer, where the layer acts as a color backdrop. So instead of merging the layers, she has two layers grouped and copied a few times with different colors applied to each clipping mask. So she tried to do a color transition between the copies of the clipping masks, but the additional clipping masks just disappeared. This could have been just user error or something else.
Okay, I'm not sure what it's happened, but I've kind of used a similar technique for the smoke. Maybe I can show you in a bit.
That's great. That's exactly what I was thinking of, Rin. Maybe this is what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is what you meant, like having like a kind of like a moving texture on top of your base. Because as you can see with the smoke, I've kind of done like little scribbles to make it look a bit more like randomized. I don't know if that's what you meant, but yeah, how I would set it up is I guess I can show you in a bit after I finish. Like I'll just finish lining like the water droplets and then I'll talk about that.
Yes, no worries at all. And hellos in the chat. Fantastic, lovely to see familiar and new faces. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Right now, you're just doing the sort of the basic cleanup, ready to color in, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Fantastic. Oh, it's looking, I can see it coming to life already. It is great. Now I see that you've used a blue pencil for your roughs and a black for for your sort of cleaned up lines, is that sort of paying homage to how blue, I believe it's like a coal race.
Color race, blue pencil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've seen that in the past from multiple guests here, and it's always exciting to sort of spot it in the wild, because that's also another technique that started in the pre-digital times, where you would use a blue pencil to do your sketches, and then ink on top of that, because blue, and that specific blue, didn't show up when you scanned the sketch. Exactly. Which is a massive time saver. So it's always fun to see how industry practices like that sort of remain as we go into digital and new mediums.
So I forgot to create, this is why you always have to have a duplicate of your frames, because otherwise you'll have to redo it like what I'm doing now.
Oh no, so can you explain again what you're doing?
I'm just creating the frames. But since I didn't have like a duplicate of like a empty frame group, I'm just redoing that process. But
gotcha.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be doing the color. Again, just to show what I usually do very quickly is that, I'm just gonna change that to like a different color so I know. I would go to my lines layer and make sure that this bar right here, I don't know what it's called, it's like on top of like whatever frame you're working on, otherwise it doesn't work. So just make sure you're there, and then grab your wand tool, select on the outer perimeter of whatever image you're trying to fill, and then select, and then inverse, and then modify, and then contrast by 2 pixels so that it selects again perfectly within the lines. Again, this is kind of needed if you're using like a slightly textured brush, because it won't select perfectly on the actual pixels. It'll be like 1 or 2 pixels off. So that's why I'm doing it. But yeah, basically, I think somebody asked me during like my Adobe Max session whether I have to do it for every single frame, and the answer is yes. You have to do it for every single frame. You have to do this and then contrast, and then, just do that.
I feel like this is a time where a plugin or something would be really, really useful, because it's such a simple task. But yes, animation, especially 2D frame by frame, is if you have to do it for one frame, you have to do it for probably all of them.
So maybe just to show, just maybe to answer the question about, I'm not sure if that's what is it that the Rin was asking. Is it?
Yeah, so it might be that there was a misclick or something like that. Of course, it is sometimes a bit difficult to explain a visual problem with just words, but I think just seeing how you how you go about doing the smoke will definitely give some clarity to the question, because I think it was a lot of layers, and maybe it's as simple as merging as much of what you can, Rin, and maybe simplifying the clipping mask or something like that. But hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit more insight later on in the space.
Actually, I think with the smoke, I actually kind of did it directly on the base layer, but I can show that with the with like the hamster, like the little character here. I've done like a clipped layer. Let me just show you very quickly. Yeah, I've done a clip layer just for like the hat and like her dress, because I wanted the flexibility of being able to change the color later on. That's why I did it. But I guess I can show you how I set it up with the smoke, maybe.
Yeah,
let's just use that,
because I think that's exactly potentially what Rin is looking for. So what you've done is you've made a new clipping mask for every frame.
Yeah,
I see. Hopefully, Rin, that helps. But we'll give you more visual examples with the smoke. Unless is there anything different from what we've seen so far with this character in terms of showing your process?
So with clipping masks, what happens in Photoshop is that if you, okay, let's say, let me just show you like the lines for the smoke. So that's kind of the finish line for the smoke. And if okay, so what I would do is the same thing. Like I would select on the outside and then use the same technique, inverse, and then contrast, and then you can fill that in, right? So this is the color layer. Let me just select color.
Fantastic. And just looking at the chat here, it seems like we've solved it for Rin. So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to let you know that the detectives have solved the case. But please continue.
Okay, so I'm not sure like what is it that she's asking, but I don't know if. So what was the question again? What was like the actual solution?
So I think it was really about merging everything into a layer. So let me see. I'm decoding the message here. So I thought about merging the shape. I think it's exactly this, where you've clipped out the shape in every frame, and then that the colors themselves are just a clipping mask under that, and that they can be separate but together at the same time. I don't know if I explained that at all, but Rin, please blink twice if you get it. I think you do. And
but yeah, I'm just gonna show you anyways, like what I'm doing with like, the clipping mask here anyways, just for maybe the rest of us.
Oh yeah, for the
but basically with clipping masks, sometimes when you clip it, as you can see here on the timeline, when I clip it, it actually disappears. So what I would want to do is that, again, I would just like duplicate that and then just do that over and over again until you have the desired amount of frames. The reason being is that if you do this, so if you create a new layer, like so, and then you create another one, and then you clip it on top. Wait, sorry, let me just. It's a bit hard to explain, but basically, I'm trying to explain it here. Sorry. So okay, let's say I have these 3 frames. You can see on my timeline here. I want to clip this layer 26 copy down here. I'll clip it down, and then on the timeline, it will just disappear.
Oh, yeah. I see. I think this is it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll have like this gap where you have to like click and then drag it back. And it's just like a lot of time wasted. So what I would do if I'm planning on clipping on a texture onto a base, I would set it up like what I have done. So, so let me just select that and delete that. So yeah, as you can see here in the video group 1, it looks like this. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers in the actual video group, but in the timeline there's only 4 layers. So it only shows you like the base layer, not the clips. It just makes it a bit easier for you to manage.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's what I would do, is that I would just like duplicate this like that, and then just like have the whatever amount that you need for the smoke, you know, let's say.
Fantastic.
And yeah, let me just show you how I would color it.
Right. I'm so happy that we were able to clarify and explain it. It's always, you know, tricky to, you know, explain with words and with audio and when it's a visual problem, but I think the solution really here is to prepare as much as you can before you start. It's the idea of measure twice, cut once, and making sure that you have your frames all laid out, and that will hopefully set you on the right track. We do have 15 minutes to go if you want to do a little bit here of how you did the smoke, and then maybe we can go into color and sort of the final stages of this piece.
Yep. So just again going back, so I've done the base for like these 3 layers, these 3 frames. And yeah, just going back, let me just change the color of the group so that you can see it. So I'll just change it to red. So yeah, so it's that one, right? So if you go back, so now we're on the first frame, and if you want to add in texture on top, but you don't want to change the base, you don't want to ruin your base, yeah, you just do it on the clip layer. So I'm just gonna turn on color dynamics, and I'm just gonna do like some squiggly lines. Just so, let's just say this is like the texture that we want. So I'm just gonna do that because I want to create like a little bit. So I'm just gonna do that, and then again go to my next frame and do it again.
Oh, I love that. Squiggles, honestly, are one of my favorite parts of drawing, because it's just, they're so full of energy and you can really get into it. Basically, just be me.
Yeah, they're really fun to do. But basically, what I'm trying to do here is that I just want to create like a randomized texture using the same brush, because I'm using one brush for this whole piece. So let's just say, okay.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the previous stream. I can't exactly remember which one it was. You'll have to clarify on that for me, but it's all Kyle T. Webster's brushes, right?
Yeah, he has like really good brushes. So I'm just using like one, I think it was like a Happy HB brush, and I've just customized it, and it's just been my favorite like pencil brush from that point on.
Fantastic.
But yeah, Kyle has really cool brushes. So, yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing here. Like I'll just keep doing that until the very end, and it'll just create like kind of like this randomized texture. And then if you don't like how it looks, you can just hide it. That's kind of the point of having a clip layer on top, because you still have your base, and you don't have to worry about messing up your base because you have it on the clip layer. Again, that also works the same way if you want to have flexibility to change certain areas of color. So I guess, so how much time do we have left? Do I have time to show how I've done my character?
We might, let's see, we have about 12 to 13 minutes. So it's up to you. I don't want to rush you. So if you think we have a little bit of time to show your approach to the character and then sort of finishing everything up. Otherwise, we can focus more on the character and then maybe just do a throwback to the finished piece at the end to sign us off.
Okay. I guess just to recap very quickly, it's talking about keyframe animation. That's kind of what I've done here with the character, but like in a very simple, it's like a very simple example of it. So what I've done here is that you can see, I think it's called ham copy 2. I'll just rename this to like character line so you don't get confused.
I love these names of these layers, because I mean with animation, especially like this, you have to really be mindful of naming your layers and keeping it organized. So the more creative names in the art file, the better, I think.
But basically how I've grouped everything is that I organize them by color. So all my lines are in green, and then all the rows are in purple, and then all the colors are in orange, so that I can see it very clearly on my timeline, like so. So yeah, going back to like the character, the frame that I'm highlighting now is a key, and then this is also a key. So it's just like those two poses, and then you want to do like the in-between poses, just to kind of like try to make it like right in the middle, and then you split it again in half. So like this one in the middle is kind of like the perfect in between of like the first and the second one, and then I want to add in another frame in between that to kind of create like this like smooth movement. So that's kind of what that's kind of like the very simple base of like key animation, I guess, which I obviously cannot like tell you in like 1 hour time, but that's kind of it.
Sounds like we will have to do more Yori Narpati animation in Photoshop here on Adobe Live to explain more and more. That sounds fantastic to me. But to reiterate rather, so you'd have your beginning, like this is where my character's starting, and then this is like the next sort of clear move. So if it's looking left to right, the in between would be where the character's kind of facing the center. So it's really about distinguishing, okay, what's the duration of this motion and how can I then split that in half to create the in between frame.
Yeah. Also, I think I remember one of the questions from my Adobe Max is that how do you match your color and make sure that the color doesn't like go out from the lines? Basically, you just have to match the duration of the frames perfectly. So with the droplets and with the smoke, it's just 2 frames. Everything's 2 frames, so it's very easy to set up. You would just copy, you know, your frames and then just have like the exact same, you know, duration for each of the frames. So you just have to make sure that you have that. So for example, here with the character, that's what I've done here. I've got like the same, it's like 1 long frame and then, you know, 3 short ones and then another long one and then 3 short ones and then another long one, depending on the timing that you have for your animation. So you just have to make sure that everything lines up. Otherwise, things, you know, it'll just go out of like the actual lines and it'll just wobble. So that's just kind of a simple thing to keep in mind, because I think somebody asked that during my Adobe Max session.
Fantastic. And for those who haven't seen it yet, I recommend that you see it, and I'm sure Flynn will post another link to it in chat. Heads up, Yori, unfortunately, we only have 10 minutes left. So it's up to you if you want to move on to a next stage, sort of in creating your animation, or if you want to stay with this lovely, gorgeous hamster character. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just do the lines, if that's okay. I'll just show you the finished lines.
Bam,
because
something we prepared earlier.
Yeah, because it's basically the same process as what I did at the beginning with the droplets. But yeah, that's how it looks. Usually when I'm doing my lines, like I would do some little adjustments. As you can see, it's a bit different from my rough. Just kind of make sure, go back and forth and just kind of make sure that your volumes are somewhat consistent. It's okay to have a little bit of a wobble, but I think as long as kind of like, yeah, the volume stays quite the same, except when you have like maybe like squash and stretch. So for example, here I've squashed the eyes a little bit when she's like kind of moving side to side, just so it has a little bit of like a bounce. So that's kind of the purpose of having that little smear. It's not that much, but it kind of helps. Also having a bit of a follow through. So for example, like with the ears, it kind of lags a little bit, so it kind of have that little bounce. Yeah, that's kind of the purpose of having so it's just like a little bit of a
it's so adorable. But with that done, so obviously with any moving parts in your animation, you'd have roughs and you would have refined lines, and you know, watching that over and over again just to make sure that the volume is right and that the line quality is consistent as well. After you've done all your lines, what's the next step? Do you want to show us the next following steps before we wrap up?
Yeah, so that would just be the same as the previous ones. We'd just be doing colors. So since we don't have enough time, so I'll just show you like how I've set it up. It's the same as how I've done the smoke. So I have my base layer and then I have a clip layer on top. Again, using me so that I can go in and then I can just change it. So if I don't like that color, let's say I want to change it to purple, I'll just, you know, paint bucket that. And yeah, it's just very easy to change. But have to make sure that you have this transparency locked, so that when you're actually doing the paint bucket, it won't create. Let me show you what happens if you don't have that locked. So if you paint bucket that, sorry, I have this one locked down here. That's why it's fine. But basically,
oh, I see. Oh no.
Yeah. So just make sure that you have that locked, and you can just very easily change it to whatever color you want.
Fantastic. A new color for every day for this little hamster.
Sorry?
A new color every day for this little hamster, I think.
Yeah. So let me just go back. I'm just undoing. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So that's kind of like the finish. Again, you can add in like, you can use the clip layer to add in anything you want. So if you want to add in like shadows, that's also a good way to go about it. But like in this case, I haven't really done like a shadow because I just want this to be like very simple. And yeah, so you have, let me show you, let me turn on the layers for the little droplets, turn off the roughs.
Fantastic. And it's great also just how the clipping mask keeps everything contained, and you don't have to worry about like rogue brush marks sort of in different areas of the illustration or animation where you don't want them. I think that is really smart. I'm personally also a massive fan of clipping masks, so seeing them used in animation, which is also something I love, is great. I'm definitely gonna have a play with this over the weekend, as I hope everyone else, it seems like in the chat as well, are gonna give it a go if they don't animate in Photoshop already. With that said, we do have about 5 minutes left. Is there any sort of more insight into the process that you want to show before we maybe just play the final animation one more time?
I think, I guess like with this simple animation, there's not really much else I can say, because it's kind of like a process of basically just going frame by frame and then roughing it out, doing the lines one by one, and then doing the colors. It's just really about spending your time and actually doing it. Because this is more of like a traditional 2D animation kind of style compared to something, again, like I said previously, that's kind of like rigged or like puppeted, like in After Effects. There might be a lot more like tips and tricks, but I guess with this, that's where I would stop, because it's like I'll just kind of go and export this out, and then I'll pop it into Premiere, and then loop it. So I guess one good tip that I can give you if you're trying to do a looping animation is obviously to keep everything the same length. So if you have like different aspects that you're animating, so for example with this one, I've got like the little smoke, I've got the little water droplet, and I've got the character, and then you have to make sure that all like the frames are, it's like kind of like the same length, so that it loops kind of at the same time. Otherwise it'll just cut off if you have like, if the animation for the smoke is a little bit longer, then it'll cut off, because I'm exporting like this much, let's say like I'm exporting this much, and then the frames for the smoke is actually like this long, it's like 12 frames long, then it'll cut off the animation and it'll jump, like it'll look like it's cut off. So that's maybe one good way to make sure that, the looping animation works.
That's a great tip. And
just make sure,
just getting the smooth loop. And speaking of that, and I'm so sorry that we have to cut it. I could stay here in this animation loop for hours. But maybe if you want to just put up the finished animation as we do a little bit of our wrap up and goodbyes, so people can see the final. Or do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
One more thing. For exporting, you go to File and then Export and then Render Video, and then you can change it. You can change the settings here. I usually go for H.264 and then high quality. Again, you can select the folder here and then just go and then render it, and that's pretty much it. Again,
Fantastic.
Like I said before, you just go to Premiere if you want to edit and want to loop it. But that's how I usually go about it. And let me just drag in the final finished animation here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Yori, for joining us. Flynn has also just posted in the chat a link to your Instagram, so everyone, I encourage you to check it out, because it's full of wonderful work like this, which again, absolutely great. So thank you, Yori, so much for joining us, and thank you everyone else for tuning in as well. We will see you all here again next week for more creative streams. Thank you, everyone.
Alrighty, thank
Yori,
you.
have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
See ya. See ya, everyone.